Hey there, friends and enemies, Joper here again, and today I want to share my first impressions of Visions of Mana, a brand new JRPG in a classic franchise that hasn't had a brand new entry in a long time. So for those of you who are fans of the franchise, it is a great welcome back in my opinion. I'm going to go over some of the pros and cons for me personally, but this game is very colorful, very classic feeling in many ways, but they do bring the genre forward a little bit as well. It's not groundbreaking, I think, at this point from what I've experienced, although I do like the direction of the story overall. I do think they do a good job with the characters as well, lots of different designs, and one aspect that I think a lot of people will really enjoy if they take use of it. Now, first off, combat is fun for me, but it does get a little bit repetitive. Luckily, you can skip some of the fights, so you can see the enemies in the open world, so you can kind of move around them. And I don't know if it's because I pre-ordered and I had a bunch of XP boosts or anything like that, but it did feel a little easy at times. Although there were a couple instances where I got one shot by random enemies on the maps who were essentially special value targets. They're a little bit more difficult, and if you see them, they're a different color. You're definitely going to have to watch out for them because they can do a lot of damage if you're not careful and you don't avoid their attacks. But the main combat, especially in the first half of the game, is not overly difficult, so that's something to remember. The boss fights were not super challenging. I'm showcasing one of them in the gameplay here, and you'll see that I was never really looking like I was gonna get defeated in this fight, but it is an early boss that I'm showing you because I don't want to go in too deep with spoilers, so you definitely want to keep that in mind. Now, some other things that I think are important to talk about. The story, as I mentioned, I think is pretty solid overall from what I played. I haven't finished the game, but I'm far enough to really get a good understanding. There's a lot of drama and emotion from the storytelling, which I like. It is a little bit over the top and can get corny, but that's not necessarily a bad thing and something you might expect from a JRPG of this nature, especially one that wants to feel like a throwback as well. Now, where this game really shines, in my opinion, for the combat, as it starts to get more difficult, is with the class options. So, essentially, you can equip each character with a different element, which changes their class. Not only does it change the weapons they use, but their abilities as well. And this is where I think the game shines the most, is because you can really mix and match these and test out your favorite classes while you're switching through the main characters in your party and picking the perfect class for your particular group. And so that's really where I think this game is at its best, because when I first got one of these classes, and now you get a new weapon, which is a great sword, and you're just slamming enemies, you feel really powerful. It does change the way the game plays, especially as you go and proceed and start fighting more difficult enemies. So I did think that was very, very cool, and it is something that I would highly recommend checking out, but also tinkering with, because I did find that when you first start off, you're kind of in a position to just throw some of those elemental changes onto whatever character can hold it. But if you really switch them around and mix and match, that's where you can find the perfect team. And so that's a place that I think is really good. The music, I think, is also really solid. So for me, it does provide the right level of ambiance and emotion and everything like that that you would hope for with music like this. I also think some of the designs of the enemies are cute but also interesting, which I do like as well. And ultimately, I like the variety of races that we see as well, because there's a lot of different character types. All the different villages have their own races, essentially, that you have to learn about and experience. So that's really good, and I think that's a nice addition as well. Otherwise, I think this game is a solid game, and if you're looking for a classic JRPG experience, this one's for you. The combat's a little bit more action heavy. It's not turn-based or anything like that, but it is sectioned off. It is very familiar if you've played classic JRPGs in the past. So I do think that it provides that. And I also think this is a fantastic entry in this series, in this franchise as well. And it does live up to that expectation you would have for a Mana game. And so after some relatively disappointment of the remake that we got just a few years ago with the Mana series, I think this is a return to form. Now, unfortunately, there is some negative news, as it does look like the developers for this game were laid off and the studio was shut down, which is incredibly disappointing. I hope that we see Square Enix maybe reform that studio, or bring in a lot of those developers and give them a chance to work on future Mana games, because this game has been very well received by the community as a whole, and I do think the player ratings, it bodes well for how Visions of Mana will be looked at over the course of the long term. Now, the game is a little bit, not long, but as you would expect, about 40 to 60 hours, depending on how much side stuff you do. There's a lot of chests and secrets found across the world, but again, it can be unnecessary to explore everything unless you want to go for the 100% completion, because of how much there is to do if you're just enjoying the main story. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Have you tried Visions of Mana? Will you try Visions of Mana? If so, if not, let me know in the comments down below. My name is Jopa. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll leave up the rest of this little clip that you can see for yourself. I hope that you enjoyed the video, as I mentioned. Have a good one, and I'll catch you all later.
Skip a turn on our journey. Too bad. I wanted to see what it was like.
Once we get through Mount Gala, we should reach the Lefeya Drifts. Then we'll be headed to the harbor.
Whoa, drifts? As in snowdrifts? You hear that, Remco? We can make snowmen to our heart's content. Well, shouldn't we be on our way to the Mana Tree? The wind. I can see it.